A lot of people ask me why Tunisia succeeded. I think Tunisia succeeded because of the process of writing the constitution. It was done right in Tunisia, and it was not done right in other countries. They tried to rush. They tried to write quickly, just get 40 or 50 experts, get them together in a room like this for a week or 2 weeks or 3, whatever, and let them and ask them to write a constitution. Okay, but who cares about that constitution? Nobody participated in it. What is the legitimacy? What is the credibility of that constitution written by 50 experts or whatever? And what happened in Egypt, and I think what happened in, or maybe happening in other countries, is that constitution actually divided the people instead of uniting the people. If you rush into writing a constitution without real debate, without real consensus, in Tunisia, we took our time. I think 2 years, but again, I don't think it's enough, but at least we took 2 years of real debates, real dialogue for 2 years. And there are reports out there about just what CSID alone has done, over 100, maybe 150 meetings and conferences, and some of them closed workshops between the policymakers, the decision makers, to build consensus. And everybody at that point realized that we need a constitution for all Tunisians. We don't want a referendum. Everybody realized from the beginning, a referendum will be a catastrophe. Because what does it mean? Even if it passes with 2/3, it means 1/3 is against it. Or 1/3 does not recognize the constitution. That is a catastrophe. You're dividing the people. We want a constitution for all Tunisians. And so we don't want a referendum. We want everybody to feel comfortable with the constitution, to support the constitution. That's the real value of the constitution. And that, I think, is the real success of the Tunisian experiment or experience so far. And it's the constitution that brought the Islamists and the secularists together. They both realized they needed each other. They needed to agree. They needed to find a formula by which they can work together. And now they're working together in the same government, in parliament, in different things. So this is the main lesson of the Tunisian experience, is how to write a constitution, and the value and of the process, the value of the dialogue, the value of the it's not the end product, it's the process of writing the constitution that is really important and that can really heal and bring the society together. So again, I think Tunisia is making good strides and good success so far, but there are many, many challenges, and the biggest challenge is the economic challenge. And unless there is real support from the United States and from Europe, from the Western world, economic support to Tunisia in the form of a mini Marshall Plan, it's clear, everybody knows what Tunisia needs. Tunisia needs 5 billion a year for the next 5 years. Everybody knows this. But that money is not coming. Sisi, after a coup, was able to get 25, 30, up to $100 billion. So there is support for a military coup. There is support for a dictatorship. But where is the support for democracy? Where are the democratic nations? There is very little support, $100 million, $200 million, it doesn't do anything. And this is my biggest fear, is if the economy really is not stabilized, it will be the economy that will bring down the revolution, and we will lose or miss a historic opportunity in the Arab world to show that democracy really works and really delivers and really brings results. And then the Arab countries will all say, okay, now we see that it can work and it can deliver. But we're still far from that. And I'm really worried about the economic situation in Tunisia and the lack of economic support from the United States and from the West. There is a lot of lip service from the United States and from the West. We love Tunisia, we want Tunisia to succeed, Tunisia is important. But so far, really, it has not translated into real economic support for Tunisia. Thank you very much.
I would have liked to be with you, but I have to vote. This is why I'm speaking via Skype. Well, what I have to tell you today is how we made the journey from despotism and authoritarianism in Tunisia to transition to democracy and, I hope, to stability. And why has Tunisia succeeded where some other countries failed? And what are the challenges we still have to face? Let me start, first of all, by the revolutions in 2011. Indeed, our youth, our citizens in Tunisia and in other countries, when they went out in the streets, they asked for two main things: liberty, that is to say, they asked for their political rights, for their freedom, freedom to organize themselves in political parties, in NGOs, freedom to demonstrate, freedom to speak, freedom to be what they want themselves to be. That is to say stop to despotism and to authoritarianism. And the second thing they asked for is karama, dignity. Dignity, that means social and economic rights. To have jobs, decent housing, and transportation, health, all what can make a human being lives decently. And of course, the revolution was spontaneous. There was no political leadership. And then came the politicians. The politicians said to Tunisian people, and they said to all other Arab people in revolution, okay, you removed the symbols of authoritarianism and despotism. Let us now put some order in your revolution and lead you to stabilization. This is why I think that success or failure of transitions are linked to the success or the failure of politicians, of political leadership of these countries. Yes, we politicians, we assume the biggest share of responsibility, either of success or of failure. Let me take the example of Tunisia. We decided to have a constituent assembly, and I think I'm deeply convinced that all political parties who took part in the elections and then those who entered the assembly, they wanted to establish democracy. They wanted to put an end to despotism. They wanted to create or to build a Tunisia of liberties and of rights and a democratic Tunisia. But very soon, we had differences, conflicts about the priorities, about the way we shall advance to democracy and to stability, and we had quarrels. Yes, we had quarrels. Shall we mention or not Sharia in the constitution? Shall we mention that Tunisia is a laïque, secularist state? Shall we reform or not administration? Shall we vote a law excluding all those who have worked with former regime or not? All these issues provoked a lot of controversies, polarized speeches, and divided society. And thanks God, in Tunisia, a group of politicians from different political parties found the way to settle these issues in speaking of dialogue, in speaking of not only electoral legitimacy, but the legitimacy of consensus. That is to say, listening not only to those who have members of parliament representing them in the process of drafting constitution, in the process of fighting corruption, in the process of implementing institutions, but also listening to those who have no parliamentarians to listen to them. It was a long process. We had many meetings with Tunisian people within the assembly and outside the assembly. We discussed with Tunisian people what kind of constitution you want, what kind of state you expect, what kind of democracy. And I think the result was positive, even if some people are criticizing us for taking a long time, 2 years and a half, but I think it's worthy it. We succeeded to have a constitution not representing only a group of people or a political party, but Tunisian people. But a constitution is not enough. We had to find a way all together to overcome political crises. Two main political crises. The political crisis after the assassination of Shakri Belaid, so there is a change of government, but the major political crisis after the assassination of our colleague Mohamed Brahmi, and the country was about to fall in the pit of violence, and all the process was about to be broken, to be smashed. And if we say that a transitional process is broken, that means that the country can fall into violence. And here I shall say that we have this capacity in different political parties, not only in my party, but in different political parties. We have leaders who have the capacity to sit around the table, to negotiate a political issue, a political solution for the crisis, and not let the solution come from the streets. We had people demonstrating, but what was really very important, that during the demonstration, which lasted more than 1 month, there was no single casualty in the streets. That was very important in our journey from despotism to democracy. And I think what was really important is this capacity to say that what is important, or most important, is that Tunisia stay in the path leading to democracy, whatever happens to governments. A government may be dismissed, but the most important thing is that Tunisia continues its way to democracy. I think another factor was important to overcome this crisis was the capacity of Tunisian people to have mediators from civil society, the UGTT, the League for Human Rights, and also the union of bosses in Tunisia and of lawyers, that was also very important. So the strength and the capacity of civil society to be a political actor helped Tunisia walk, if you can say, or advance more or less safely from authoritarianism to democracy. And I think the main achievement was not only agreeing on a government to lead the country in elections, it was having elections and accepting the results of the elections. This is very important, because what can be also a failure of politicians is not accepting the results of elections when they arrive to elections, when the election is held, when the people says it's a choice. And I think Tunisia guaranteed the success of its transition the day Rashid al-Ghannouchi, president of Ennahda, said, "We accept the results of the elections." What was also very important in Tunisia is that the process of dialogue, of consensus, of, let's say, compromise, is continuing after the elections. Ennahda refused to vote a law excluding from political life people who were formerly working with Ben Ali regime. That was positive, but also Qaid Sibsi, the president of Tunisian Republic, refused after the election the exclusion of Nahda from the government. And this is also very positive. So there is a will, a readiness from the two main political parties in Tunisia to forget about their conflicts and to work together for the interest of the country. I think this is peculiar. This is specific to Tunisia. But now that we have a government, we have many other challenges. The economic challenge is a big one. Yes, our youth are still waiting for jobs. Poor families are still waiting for health care, for housing, and for work, jobs, and revenues. Our cities are still having very bad infrastructure. So the economic challenge is the biggest one. The former lecturer in the former round table you had said that democracy is not enough sometimes. Yes, when there is no delivery of, let's say, dignity, that is jobs, development, peace, security, democracy is no more sufficient. So we have to tackle these problems. And of course, we have another challenge, is how to face the radicalizations of our youth. And this is not an issue of simply an issue of security. It's an issue also of education, of economic answers. We shall provide these youth with jobs, not to let them very fragile to the, let's say, the temptations of these networks recruiting them to fight in some other countries. And of course, we shall deconstruct the speech of radical Islam and understand why our youth are attracted by such movements, to understand how to secure them, how to give them a culture, how to give them also the adequate societies in which they want to be and to live and to build future and not be transformed into killing machines. I think that our democracy will really be safe and secured and stabilized the day we achieve the implementation and the setting of all the regulatory bodies and the constitutional institutions mentioned in our constitution. When we implement them to secure that we have institutions for this democracy. We will be really successful the day when authoritarianism and despotism is no more in our mentalities, in our behavior, and that these mentalities and these behaviors will be impacted by citizenship, by democracy, by respect of the rule of law, and of course the day when we find solution for radicalization, for extremism, and when we secure our citizens, our police force, and our army from being targets to killers coming from sometimes our countries and from times outside. So this is, let's say, my storytelling of how Tunisia is leading its way from despotism to revolution to democracy to stability. Thank you for being patient and listening to me.
The major takeaway, and I'll deal with both of these parts in some detail, the major takeaway from what we should export about Tunisia's experience to the wider MENA region, to the United States, to the EU, policymakers and citizens alike, is that the transitional justice process, if given enough time, enough support, and enough patience, works. That transitional justice, like in South Africa, like in Spain, if given enough time and effort on behalf of stakeholders like Meherzia, like the presidency, like the prime ministership, like the various political groupings in Tunisia, it succeeds in arresting, and it also succeeds in accounting for large-scale human rights abuses that occurred over a period of authoritarianism. The second part that I want to talk about, what also should be exported from Tunisia's years as a transitional society, is that by itself, and for reasons I'll go into later, by itself, transitional justice institutions and bodies do not themselves guarantee the prosperity that Ridwan was talking about. You can have a stability, a modicum of political stability, but in terms of economic prosperity, this still seems elusive. And please keep in mind that Tunisia, as people have mentioned already in the case of Egypt, as I expect we'll hear more after lunch, Tunisia is the best case example. That is, societies such as Egypt, but more tragically Yemen, Syria, others, Lebanon, we could even say, given the vast influx of Syrian refugees into the Lebanese state, are this sort of transitional success, the success towards transitional justice that Tunisia has achieved, seems almost like a distant, almost a fantastical goal to achieve in those cases. What are the secrets of Tunisia's success? The first one is partnering with, not alienating or expelling, foreign NGOs to craft transitional justice bodies and policies. We could take Egypt, we could take Syria, we could take the Gulf, certain nations in the Gulf, as increasingly hostile to working with NGOs, non-governmental organizations that seek to build comparative forms of policymaking between experiences both West and East. And some of the institutions in Tunisia that have benefited from this, transitional justice institutions, the Ayad Ben Ashur Commission, one of the first commissions created after the revolution itself, which encompassed not only native talent from Tunisia, but also reached out to various German, EU, US think tanks and other groupings in Tunisia as well as abroad to begin the process of creating a constitutional framework for Tunisia. The other was the lesser well-known Boudherbala Commission. So Tawfiq Boudherbala was commissioned to look at the victims of state violence in the aftermath of the December-January revolution, if we're going to put it succinctly. And there again, Boudherbala and his commissioners looked at comparative examples, both from South Africa, from North Africa, Morocco, and Algeria, to guide their work. And lastly, but not least, the Electoral Commission itself, which has monitored Tunisia's elections over the past several years, has worked with the Carter Center, with other groups, NGOs, to make sure that they adhere to best practices as they're understood in counting election results. The second reason for Tunisia's success is that it embraced, and this is Mahrouzia's main point, as I understood it, it embraced compromise and dialogue between potential adversarial groupings, rather than animosity and confrontation. And one of the most successful examples of this is the negotiations and the continued lines of communications between the two major parties in Tunisia now, Nida Tunis and Ennahda. However, in addition to this, if we look below the party level, the strength and the resilience in many ways of the bureaucratic Tunisian state, the deeper state beyond the parties that change, the police, the finance officials, the army, all of this, I think, also bespeaks a mode of compromise and dialogue between the average citizenry and these groupings, whether they're in ministries or whether they're in unions. What victories have come out of this for Tunisia? Despite the 10,000 or 8,000 Tunisians who, since 2010, 2011, have gone abroad to fight in the Levant.
3,000.
No, since the 2010, there was about, I've read the figure of about, all told, those who died there, those who came back, people were saying 9,000, 3,000. The dismantling of terror cells throughout the country, the ongoing investigation of the assassinations, the political assassinations that Mahrouzia alluded to, and most importantly, in my view, the astute management of the economy in a time of unprecedented global and regional turmoil. None of this would have been possible without, on some level, the average citizen having some level of confidence in the bureaucrats that go about their business and do their work day in, day out. Finally, I think that Tunisia's success in this transitional process has been by adhering and establishing processes and timelines to provide for peaceful, orderly transfer of power at multiple levels of government, rather than decrying local agents of political change as, quote, agents of foreign powers and or traitors to the nation. And if we look across the broader MENA region, indeed President Obama in his interview with the New York Times a few weeks ago mentioned this specifically, that if you take domestic opposition and you frame it as a foreign conspiracy, you choke off any sort of valuable or valuable interlocutors that you might have to deal with unrest, to deal with potential for civil unrest. And of course, the major examples of this are the national elections, 2011, 2014, as well as the Constitution, the drafting and the passing of the Constitution, as well as, in certain cases, especially after the two assassinations that Mahrouzia mentioned, the introspection shown by the ruling party and Nahda at that time, and the willingness to step aside in preparation for a more technocratic group to take over to lead the country into the next elections. Compromise leads to stability, and it's not a zero-sum game. It's not I compromise, I lose, as it's seen, unfortunately, throughout much of the Middle East, perhaps most tragically in Syria, where if you look at Bashar al-Assad and you look at his opponents, increasingly, after 4 years of war in Syria, we're left with the extremists on both sides, effectively. As I mentioned earlier, the second part of my talk will be devoted to the limits of a transitional justice process, even when successful. Transitional justice focused exclusively on hitting political benchmarks cannot resolve the challenges posed by economic change and global technological transformation. And this is something that I have heard relatively little about when talking about the Arab Spring. That is how global technological change, sometimes called the third industrial revolution, the digital revolution, how this is shaping or reshaping economic policies and political economies globally, and how will it affect the Arab Spring, the countries that experience the Arab Spring. And the last panel, Michelle Dunn mentioned this idea of demography, a youth bulge in Egypt. Where will the second speaker, Shadi Hamid, talked about ISIS offering an alternative system of governance after citizens have a fundamental loss of faith in the state. Where will the jobs come from in the next millennium? Where will the jobs come from in the next 50 to 100 years? By looking at groups of scholars who have been working on this issue, mostly within America, that's the literature that I know best, I'm thinking of two scholars specifically who offer a way forward to understanding this. One is Manuel Castells, a sociologist who's just finished a book a few years ago called Communication Power, where he talks about the transformative effects of social media on the political system, how social media itself, its very success, tends to sap legitimacy away from formal heads of state, formal ruling parties. The second, and I think most important in my view, is Martin Ford, who wrote a book recently, but his earlier book was called Lights at the End of the Tunnel. What Ford posits is that the increasing growth of technologies such as robotics, software, artificial intelligence, is increasingly reducing our need for labor inputs into society. That is, rather when you used to go to a doctor and say, read my radiogram, now the radiogram can be read for you by machine. For any of you who know or have seen the Google driverless cars, this is another example of labor-less inputs or labor-less technologies in the future. Educational systems are still stuck in the 20th century and nowhere more so than in the Middle East and North Africa. Churning out more engineers, churning out more groups of people whose vocations are seen to be societally advantageous is nonetheless not going to provide jobs and not going to provide meaningful employment for these groups of youth, this youth bulge that Michelle mentioned earlier. And finally, the rise of militias from Libya to Iraq to Syria to Yemen can be seen potentially, or at least in part, as a way of providing work, a way of providing work and a way of providing an income for groups of young men mostly who are finding themselves increasingly marginalized by these global technological and economic changes. And thank you.
Thank you.
Back Okay. I think if you have questions, please come up. Mehrazia has stayed with us on the line with Skype from Tunis, so we don't have a lot of time for questions. So if we can, any questions for her, we'll begin with those. Identify yourself, and we need a mic here at the question stand. We have Mehrazia back on the screen. Good. Okay, please identify yourself. And Mehrazia, can you hear? Okay.
Ali Ramadan Abu Zakuk, an elected member of the Libyan parliament who is boycotting it in Tobruk. My question is really to Her Excellency Mehrazia and to Radwan. In the experience of Tunis, which is our neighbor country, we learn a lot of lessons from it, and also brought us an issue that we have not studied it before, the issue of consensual democracy, not majority democracy. I think there is a need in the transitional period, and I think Tunisia have tried it and is still trying it, and we like you to elaborate on it, because really the majority democracy which the elections brought about has brought also a lot of divisions and a lot of confrontations between both sides. The country has not yet learned the culture of democracy, so would you please elaborate on it? The second point, which is to for the Georges, when you said that the rise of militia was a substitute for employment, I think in a way, yes, but as a Libyan, I know that the revolutionary, militia were fighting because there was a coup d'etat against the whole revolution in Libya. People are giving their lives not because they have a stipend, but because there was an issue that the revolution is at stake. Would you please comment? Thank you.
Okay. Mehrazia, go ahead.
It was about consensual democracy and majority democracies. This is actually the question.
Can you hear okay? Okay. Yes. Yes.
Well, I'm not sure that I have listened to all the question, but let me try to answer what I have listened to. Is that is the democracy only or is consensus is not harming real democracy? That means that we have a majority and have a minority, we have a governing party and have an opposition. Well, we want to implement, to build a real democracy in Tunisia in which there are opposition, and we guaranteed the rights of opposition in the constitution. But I think that our country is still building its democracy, and this is why we need to search consensus and to listen more to each other, not on the basis of the results of elections, but on the basis of national interest. But this doesn't mean that we are going for, let's say, endlessly in practicing this consensual democracy. We need consensus now to reaffirm and consolidate democracy and democratic, let's say, institutions in our countries. But of course, on the long run, the target is to build a democracy, like in any other country.
Thank you. Will the other panelists care to comment? Radwan?
I want to add something to what Mehrazia said, which I think very quickly in Tunisia we realized that we are not in a democracy. In a democracy, you can govern with 51%. I mean, that's the basic principle of democracy, a simple majority rule. If you have 51%, you can govern. But when you are building democracy, when you are in a transition to democracy, then you cannot. Because the other 49%, let's say, are afraid. There is not enough guarantees in the system. That's the difference. In a democracy, there are guarantees that the 49% could become a majority next time, and that their rights are protected while you are ruling with your 51%. In a transition to democracy, there are no such guarantees, and so the 49%, or even less, even if it's 30%, do not feel safe and will feel threatened, and therefore will not wait and will not be patient until the next election or whatever. And this is what we see happened in Egypt, for example. The Ikhwan, especially with the coalition with the Noor party, had 60 or 70% majority. But you have 30% roughly, or a little bit maybe more, who felt really threatened by that regime because there were not enough guarantees in the system. So I think in Tunisia we realize that we are not in a democracy yet, that 51% is certainly not enough, and that we need to build by consensus so that everybody has an interest in the success of democracy and do not feel threatened by democracy.
Do we have any more questions? We have time for one more, I think.
I think I want to respond to Ali's question.
There is another question to him.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Tom. Thanks for your question. I appreciate it. I did not mean to... Go ahead. Go ahead.
Can I speak?
Yeah.
Excuse me, please. I would like to stay more for many other questions, but I'm called to vote, so to consolidate the procedure. I do really apologize. It was such a pleasure and a privilege for me to listen to the co-lecturers and to be in contact with you. And would you please allow me now to go, because I have to vote the hour.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, bye. A militia substitutes for employment. I think that employment or work is a multifaceted category that is both cultural, has cultural valences, that is, I feel better about myself because I work, and it also provides me with the income, the revenue, so that I can also culturally meet standards that the society has set for me. I can get married, I can get a car, I can get a house. That said, I think again, if you look at the rise of militias in Libya, where the predominant economy is a rentier economy based on oil, how many people do we need to run oil fields? Well, not that many. And increasingly fewer, right, as ports and other facilities get more and more automated. And I know this from my time in the Gulf, where they were building port after port from Oman to Abu Dhabi, but those ports increasingly can be run with very few people. Not like the ports of, let's say, the 1940s or 50s, where you needed Brooklyn Navy Yards. So I agree with you, however, it's not just about a paycheck, it's also about feeling you're connected to something, which is the best form of work. You're connected to something that is both remunerative, giving you an ability to live and hit those social markers, while also providing you with some sort of satisfaction, I suppose. Yeah.
Qutayba Adilbi. I do aid in development and conflict consulting in the Middle East. I get back like similar to his question. You focused a lot, like the three of you, on the economic needs for people to get radicalized or like join the radicalized militias. Back to experience, like in the Middle East, or back even to history, Osama bin Laden, Abdullah Azzam, and all the Arab Mujahideen didn't go to Afghanistan for economic reasons. They had the money back home. In the Middle East, foreign fighters, for example, coming to Syria, where I'm from, they don't come for money. They come actually with a lot of money and with money connections that they bring to the country. So when we focus, I see we're focusing a lot on the economic reasons, but we totally forget the ideological needs for those people. When they see, as you said, they have only two choices, either dictatorship, which they face for like 50 years, or to be radicalized. It seems people would go more with radicalization, even though that would not mean a lot of stability income. Like, if, for example, in Syria, American-backed rebels, they would get more salaries than, for example, Nusra or any other Islamic movements. That didn't make people join more the American-backed rebels, but they had their more ideological needs, so they would join Nusra and other groups. So what is your reflection on that? Thank you.
Oh, you want to start? Sure. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I can answer. I could start answering the question. The first point I would make out is that the reason I focused on the second part anyway, on economics, was that I think a lot of these changes are both gradual and hard to detect. It's easier to see the rise of militias. It's easier to see the ideological components of why people choose to fight, let's say, in Syria, or they choose to fight in Libya, and less easy to see some of the broader, longer-term economic shifts that are closing off other avenues for them to perhaps participate as productive citizens in their economies. So that's one thing. The second thing that you mentioned, from what I was reading about ISIS and Nusra, there are indeed incentives. There are indeed financial incentives for doctors, engineers, and others to go to Syria to join. So there is a quote-unquote salary to be paid, and that salary is graded depending on whether you come from Western Europe, the United States, or elsewhere. But in that case, many people, you could say, like I was saying to, in response to Ali's question, people have a complex motive for joining one group or another in these conflicts. And that part of that motive is economic. And that if those economic needs are not somehow met by other forms of employment, other forms of work, then we may continue to see the rise of militias, the rise of other groups, armed groups, let's say, throughout the Middle East.
Yeah, to add to that answer, I think that nobody is saying that the economic reasons are the only reasons for violent radicalism or terrorism. There are many reasons, of course. Loss of dignity is the main reason. The Tunisian revolution, when it happened, was called Thawrat al-Hurriya wal-Karama, revolution for freedom and dignity. It's the loss of dignity that's the main reason for young people to join these groups. And of course, the economic prosperity or finding a job even is one of the important things that in order for people to have a dignified life. Yes. If you are a graduate of a university and you are unemployed for 10 years, you know, it's hard to feel dignity. You cannot get married, you still live with your parents, you don't have a job, I mean, you're dependent on your parents even to eat, you know, and you know, and you see future as bleak. Mm-hmm. So of course there is an economic component that has to be addressed. It's not the only component, because also if you don't have freedom, you don't have dignity. As human beings, without freedom, there is no dignity. If we are not free to think and free to express our opinions, then you don't feel dignity. So there are many reasons for terrorism, and there is, of course, also a twisted, radical interpretation of Islam that is gaining ground because of oppression, because of dictatorship. And I think because some regimes, some governments want to have terrorism or want to have radicalism to justify their existence, to justify their oppressive methods. There has been a lot of studies that show that some of these regimes actually support these terrorist groups while they are fighting them. They are supporting them with one hand and fighting them with the other. Because it's those acts of terrorism justify or give justification to the regimes. This even started in Algeria back in the 90s. So there are many reasons, but if we want, I mean, if we want democracy to succeed, you know, we also want a modern interpretation of Islam through ijtihad. And we've been talking about this a long time. It's not a new idea, but you cannot do ijtihad without freedom. You need an environment of freedom, of democracy, to be able to come up with a modern interpretation of Islam that is acceptable and accepted by the majority of the people.
Thank you to our panel. I think we've seen that the case for Tunisia